In our headlines on this Monday afternoon, November 20th, here in South Korea. President Yoon Suk-yeol is heading to London today for a state visit that will seek to strengthen diplomatic relations which mark 140 years this year before flying to Paris to support Busan's bid to host the 2030 World Expo. Meanwhile, South Korea warns North Korea against the latter's preparations for a third attempt at placing a spy satellite into orbit, vowing to respond with tough countermeasures should the regime choose to proceed with its launch. And South Korea's T1 beat China's Weibo Gaming this past Sunday to secure a record fourth League of Legends World Championship, which is widely considered the Super Bowl of esports among industry insiders and global fans alike. President Yoon Suk-yeol has departed for the UK on this Monday for a state visit that follows an invitation extended by King Charles III. Our senior presidential correspondent Oh Soo-young starts us off.
President Yoon Suk-yeol says his state visit to the United Kingdom will serve as a catalyst for Korea to emerge as one of the UK's global strategic partners. Speaking to The Telegraph ahead of his trip on Monday to mark 140 years of bilateral relations, Yoon called for closer collaboration between Seoul and London amid complex global polycrises, including North Korea's nuclear threat and the regime's weapons cooperation with Russia, as well as wars in Ukraine and the Middle East. He also expressed concern over closer collaboration between Pyongyang, Moscow and China, as well as tensions in the South China Sea. These make it all the more vital to ramp up economic and security cooperation with the UK, Yoon told the paper. In a press briefing, Yoon's spokesperson Lee Do-won said Sunday that during Yoon's state visit, the two governments would announce a comprehensive document laying out specific areas of cooperation called the Korea-UK Accord.
Excluding the United States, it is unprecedented for our country to issue a comprehensive document of this kind. It is expected to be an opportunity to re-establish our diplomatic relations.
Following a royal reception, luncheon and tribute to Korean war veterans, Lee added that the South Korean leader would make a speech to Parliament in English, as he did at the US Congress. With Britain's tilt to the Indo-Pacific, its post-Brexit strategy to engage more deeply with countries in the region, amid trade and geopolitical uncertainty in the world, the two countries are expected to bolster cooperation in various fields.
The UK has a developed defence industry and is also a permanent member of the UN Security Council. Since Korea will serve as a non-permanent member of the Council for 2 years starting next year, there's great potential for cooperation in terms of security.
Also elaborating on economic ties, Lee noted that the UK is the world's sixth largest economy with a GDP of over $3 trillion and a trade volume with South Korea of $12 billion last year.
We're seeing rise in luxury goods trade, we're seeing rise in renewable energy, we're seeing rises in automotives. You know, some of our automotive brands, Korea is in their top 5 markets. So defence as well, and digital. So Korea is a really strong market for British business, and it's great that that's increased. This year marks the start of negotiations for the free trade agreement, and that is a really exciting opportunity for Britain and UK businesses.
Following his visit to the UK, Seoul's top office says Yoon will head to France for 3 days to promote Korea's bid to host the 2030 World Expo in the port city of Busan, engaging with various delegates of the Expo's organisation based in Paris. He said the final presentation for Busan will be made by an influential figure in the international community ahead of the final vote on November 28. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, President Yoon ended his diplomatic agenda in the US with the tech roundtable at Stanford University with his Japanese counterpart Fumio Kishida on the sidelines of the APAC Summit in San Francisco. Our correspondent Kim Do-yeon reports.
A clear sign of an improving bilateral relationship at Stanford University on Friday local time, leaders of South Korea and Japan, for the first time ever, co-hosted an event in a third country.
국제사회에서 저와 가장 가까운 기시다 후미오 총리님과 또 혁신의 산실인 스탠포드 교정을 함께 방문하게 되어 매우 기쁩니다.
Kishida also called the occasion a big day, referring to Stanford's American football game against local rivals UC Berkeley, and said it's a, quote, new feeling as the leaders met for the 8th time just this year.
Until last year, no one could have imagined a situation like this. My belief is that if a national leader makes decisions and takes action, it can change the world.
President Yoon made efforts to improve bilateral relations since early this year as cooperation between the neighboring countries had been severed on multiple fronts since 2019 when a South Korean court ruled that Japanese firms should compensate the victims of wartime forced labor during World War II. At this symposium, the two pledged to work together in science and tech, including ways to cooperate in hydrogen energy and tackling climate change. And of course, all this with their other key partner from Camp David Summit, the US. This groundbreaking event was Yoon's last stop of his APAC trip, where he engaged in 3 days of multilateral diplomacy. President Yoon, addressing leaders representing 60% of the world's GDP, proposed an APEC initiative for smart mobility led by South Korea, focusing on eco-friendly and autonomous vehicles. He emphasized South Korea's aim to pioneer rule-based AI development and advocated for a return to rule-based multilateral trade. Amidst all this, he met with leading business figures in the US as well, with 4 companies, General Motors, DuPont, IMC, and Ecolab, announcing investments to South Korea totaling $1.16 billion US.
By attracting foreign investment through the top office's diplomatic efforts, we can immediately contribute not only to our economic growth, but also to the creation of good jobs. The investment from 4 US companies is expected to generate numerous high-quality jobs, especially in advanced industries like automobiles and semiconductors.
In addition, his participation at the Sideline Summit among the 14 IPAF members garnered attention as 2 more pillars on cooperation on clean energy and anti-corruption measures were officially accepted, with only the 4th and final pillar on trade matters to be agreed. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, in the Middle East, Israel has shared footage of a fortified tunnel beneath Gaza's largest medical complex, which it had said served as a Hamas command center. Our Lee Seung-jae has the latest.
The Israeli military on Sunday released a 3-minute, 27-second-long video showing an exposed tunnel shaft at the Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza City. The video, which was shot last Friday, showed an underground tunnel extending downward from the shaft opening. As the camera makes its way down, a set of spiral stairs are visible, with walls of the tunnel appearing to be made of vertical slabs of concrete with an arched concrete roof. The Israel Defense Forces say the tunnel shaft extends 10 meters underground, with the tunnel itself continuing for 55 meters. However, Hamas and hospital officials have repeatedly denied that the hospital is anything other than a medical complex. The IDF also announced Sunday that its forces had captured more than 100 Hamas operatives, ranging from rocket unit members, sniper unit members, explosives experts, and logistics officers. The Israeli military, along with Israel's intelligence agency, said that some of the captured include those that took part in the October 7th attacks. It added that through interrogations, it had received information, the locations of Hamas underground tunnels and weapons depots, and details of operational methods. Meanwhile, after the Palestinian authorities said Israel manipulated reports to justify Israel's attack on the Gaza Strip, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu denied the claims, calling it absurd. The comments come as Tel Aviv-based Haaretz newspaper said an Israeli police investigation into a Hamas attack on the Nova Music Festival on October 7th showed that an Israeli attack helicopter had killed some of the attendees. According to the source, the Israeli combat helicopter fired at Hamas fighters and other Palestinians who crossed through the border fence from Gaza into Israel, but also fired at some of the Israelis attending the music festival. The Israeli police says its focus is on police activity and that it has no information on military action. The White House on Sunday claims that negotiators are getting closer to an agreement with Hamas to release 50 hostages in exchange for a temporary ceasefire and Israel allowing in more aid, including fuel. According to CBS News, citing 2 sources familiar with the matter, a written draft agreement is being passed between parties. As for the length of the ceasefire, the source said relevant parties are leaning towards 6 hours per day for 4 days, with a possibility of a second phase of hostage release. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Back on the peninsula, South Korea's military has warned North Korea against seeking a third attempt at placing a spy satellite into orbit. Chief Director of Operations of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Kang Ho-pil, also vowed countermeasures should Pyongyang choose to dismiss this warning. Earlier on this Monday, the National Security Council held a standing committee meeting on prospects of such a launch in the near future and the viable response options. Speaking to the media this past weekend, Seoul's Defense Minister Shin Won-sil claimed that Pyongyang may launch a satellite as early as within a week, following two failed missions back in May and in August. Korea's T1 clinched the League of Legends World Championship this past Sunday to cement the country's standing in the global arena. Our Yoon has the highlights.
The 2023 League of Legends World Championship final match was held on Sunday at Gocheok Skydome in Seoul. The country's largest indoor venue was filled with a passionate community of fans. And kicking off the climax moment of the 2023 League of Legends World Championship, video game developer Riot's new virtual pop group, Heartsteel, performed at the opening ceremony, which also featured K-pop group NewJeans, who sang the championship's anthem, Gods.
This year's theme is the grind, the glory. Behind every trophy is a long journey of dedication and hard work. Here, a sellout crowd of over 18,000 have gathered to witness the moment of glory.
The Korean League's T1 and Chinese League's Weibo Gaming competed in matches played in a best-of-5 format. T1 took control, winning the first and second matches. You could feel the passionate support and desperate cheering of the fans watching, knowing that the win was in sight.
This is my first time to watch matches on site, and the atmosphere here is so exciting. I also enjoyed NewJeans' performance.
Victory in the third round meant T1 lifted the Summoners Cup and set a new record for League of Legends World Championship wins. It makes it even more special that they were able to celebrate the victory in front of their home crowd.
Over everything, I'm so grateful to be able to play in front of so many people. And to be honest, the result is not important to me.
I was at Worlds last year and their defeat was crushing. So it was great to see them, have that comeback this year.
T1 player Faker, seen as an inspiration for many gamers, is now the only League of Legends player in the world to have won the World Championship 4 times.
I believe that as long as we are willing to learn, the victory will come. This time, I was also lucky enough to win. I set a goal for this competition to not care so much about the result and to just focus on the process. And I believe that did enhance my skills during the games. I learned so much during this Worlds.
Now teams from South Korea have 8 world champion titles since they started participating in 2012, which was the tournament's second year. According to Riot CEO, every match played as well as the support of fans contributes to the company's mission of delivering exceptional experiences as a truly global sport, which is why Riot is committed to honoring the excitement and the fandom of esports around the world.
Korea is the birthplace of esports, and you have delivered an unforgettable world. 감사합니다.
Yoon, Arirang News.
And in related news, Korea's largest gaming festival came to a close this past Sunday after a spectacular show. Our culture correspondent Song Yoo-jin was there.
Games have been making headlines in South Korea this year, with athletes securing gold at the inaugural esports events at the Hangzhou Asian Games and the return of the League of Legends World Championship for the first time in 5 years. Now, the spotlight shifts to G-Star, Korea's biggest game fair that's held annually in the southern port city of Busan.
So this year's G-Star is the biggest edition yet, with more than 1,000 game companies running more than 3,300 booths across 4 days. It's a gaming extravaganza like never before.
A third-quarter downturn in sales for most domestic game companies was attributed to a lack of variety of genres and platforms. So participants have responded by diversifying their game lineups. Notably, Korean gaming giant NCSoft is making a comeback to G-Star after an 8-year hiatus, unveiling 7 new games, the most among all participants.
We've got this shooting game called LLL, a collection game called BSS, and Battle Crush, which enables cross-play on the Nintendo Switch, mobile and PC. Our goal at G-Star is to engage with users by showing them what we've got.
Another heavyweight, Smilegate, is making its return after 9 years with the mobile version of its PC game Lost Ark, with plans to transform the game into a multi-platform one. Regular participant Netmarble is introducing 3 new games, each with different genres: action-adventure, subculture, and science fiction. The one garnering the most attention is the action-adventure-themed 7 Deadly Sins Origin.
Last year, we unveiled the game's trailer at G-Star, and since then, we've received a lot of positive feedback from fans. Today, we finally have the opportunity to roll out our game to users.
Offering a wider variety of games, the venue was bustling with game enthusiasts from day one.
Last year has a smaller booth, but it's much bigger this year, so I want to try out new games as well.
It's very impressive, lots of huge displays, lots of interesting cosplayers that I've been seeing, so it surpassed my expectations.
송유진, 아리랑 뉴스, 부산.
And Korea is hosting UNESCO's first International Center for Documentary Heritage. My colleague Choi Soo-young covers this event and its broader significance. Do take a look.
Documentary heritage is a key part of our understanding of the history of civilization. The UNESCO International Center for Documentary Heritage opened on November 1st in Cheongju, Chungcheongbuk-do Province, home to the world's first metal movable type, Jikji. Korea, with the Asia's largest and the world's 5th largest documentary heritage, became the first to open such a center.
UNESCO believes the power of knowledge that has contributed to facilitation of human development, especially through documentary heritages represented by global communities.
A special opening exhibition prepared for this event delighted visitors.
This exhibition brings joy by exploring the documentary heritage of the world, focusing on the big theme of giving light, progress, and hope to humanity.
Visitors can experience the history of humanity, accompanied by records as they pass through 5 zones. In the Zone 1, an artwork shapes light against the darkness using the nebula sky disk likely created in the Bronze Age, showing celestial phenomena as a motif using light and shadows. You can also see the big wall art screen, which combines documentary heritage with modern digital media. The head director of this opening exhibition said anyone can truly feel the essence of the light.
I use light as a metaphor so that the audience can actually feel the discovery and the significance through their own discovery through by being in the exhibition.
Additionally, visitors can contemplate records of humanity's darker moments such as war, disease and discrimination, and witness the efforts made by humanity to overcome such darkness. In the final zone, visitors also have the opportunity to leave their own records by writing a letter.
I want them to forget about everyday, worries, forget about the congested traffic and city noise and the lights, noisy lights and signs on the way.
The exhibition will be open until June 28th next year. Choi Soo-young, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. With only a year to go until the 2024 election, US President Joe Biden has seen the lowest approval ratings of his presidency and is behind the likely Republican candidate Donald Trump in almost all recent major national surveys. Recent national surveys from CBS News, YouGov, CNN, SSRS, Fox News, Marquette University Law School, and Quinnipiac University all showed former President Trump ahead of the incumbent Biden by between 2 and 4 percentage points. This is the first time Trump has surpassed Biden in the majority of national general election polls and is also a rare moment in history for an incumbent to be behind in pre-election polls. Following the early November Reuters Ipsos poll, which showed 39% approval rates for Biden, an NBC poll released on Sunday also came in at a new low of 40% for Biden's approval rates. A majority of voters also disapprove of Biden's handling of the Israel-Hamas war. Australia beat India in the Cricket World Cup final to claim the country's 6th title. Australia won the final on Sunday by 6 wickets with 7 overs to spare, assisted by Travis Head's sensational century. In the final of the 2023 ICC Men's Cricket World Cup at Narendra Modi Stadium in Ahmedabad, India was the favourite to win after a 10-match winning run leading up to the finals. But with over 100,000 fans in home crowd and India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi up in the stands at the game, India was bowled out for 240 runs, and Australia's Travis Head hit 137 runs to help his side reach 241 for 4. The next Cricket World Cup will take place in South Africa, Namibia and Zimbabwe in 2027, with an expanded 14 teams competing. Rosalynn Carter, the wife of former U.S. President Jimmy Carter, has died at the age of 96. The Carter Center announced on Sunday that she died peacefully at home in Plains, Georgia, where she was receiving hospice care. Mrs. Carter had been diagnosed with dementia in May of this year. As a wife of the 39th president, she was a well-known figure in the U.S. politics for her role as close advisor to President Carter. After serving as the honorary chairwoman of the President's Commission on Mental Health, she founded the Carter Center in Atlanta in 1980, along with her husband, to continue their humanitarian work. A rare bottle of Macallan 1926 single malt whiskey has been sold for a record-breaking $2.7 million. The sale at a Sotheby's auction on Saturday in London makes it the most expensive wine or spirit ever sold at an auction. The Scotch whisky manufactured by the famed Macallan distillery was matured for 60 years in dark oak sherry casks before being bottled in 1986. Only 40 bottles were ever produced and were not made available for purchase, rather offered to top clients. A similar bottle of Macallan 1926 with a different label was sold in 2019 for around $1.9 million. Kim Si-young, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. The recent temperature fluctuations have left many battling colds. Take care by wearing face masks in crowded areas and washing hands frequently. Afternoon highs will dip slightly compared to Sunday, but sunnier skies are expected in the upper regions this afternoon. With winter approaching, dry air has prompted advisories for Gangwon-do and Gyeongsang-Pukdo provinces. Please be careful with anything that could start a fire. Expect similar to slightly lower daily highs today. Seoul and Chuncheon peak at 11 degrees, Gwangju, Cheongju at 15, Busan warmer at 17 degrees this afternoon. Nationwide air quality remains decent all day today under bright skies. Looking ahead, warmer than usual weather persists until midweek. However, rain is expected to bring freezing temperatures to the country afterwards, going down to as low as -5 degrees Celsius on Saturday here in Seoul. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions. And those are the top stories here at this hour in Korea. Coming up next is our panel session, so do stay with us. Thank you for now.
Welcome. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
Contour the world, simply contour. India, the United Kingdom, New Zealand. Woo!
I'm excited. Are you excited?
Of course.
Yeah.
Music, start.
Welcome. (24시간) 불이 꺼지지 않는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
I'm live.
저를 도와주시는 분들이
저희와 함께 해주시는 세션분들
아무리 봐도 없지. 펜션 같은데 이런 거 아무도 안 하는 거고.
좋아요.
Busan, Korea is already reaching the entire world, like ocean waves that travel far and wide. It's Busan, the perfect World Expo city, transforming our world, navigating toward a better future.
Contour the world, simply contour. India, the United Kingdom, New Zealand. Woo!
I'm excited. Are you excited?
Of course.
Yeah.
Music, start.
Welcome. (24시간) 불이 꺼지지 않는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
in defense talks here with Washington and economic talks in San Francisco with APAC partners, Pyongyang played host to a Russian delegation last week. So what was the gist of the latest meeting between North Korea and Russia across the border? And why do some pundits believe collaboration between North Korea and Russia may be a cause of some concern for China? Also, what is the latest regarding the reported fresh advances in North Korea's banned ballistic missile program? Hope your work week is off to a good start. You're watching Monday's edition of Issues and Insiders. I'm Min San-hee. Today we touch upon the various diplomatic engagements here on the peninsula and beyond over the past week. For this, I have Thomas Moreska with me in the studio. Thomas, welcome back.
Thanks, great to be here.
I also have Malene Jensen with us. Malene, it's good to have you here.
It's good to be here.
Right, Thomas, there was a flurry of diplomatic engagements here on the peninsula and beyond, over in the US, that is. But let's begin here on the Korean peninsula. I believe a Russian delegation visited Pyongyang last week. It was led by its Natural Resources Minister. Could you tell us a bit more about that particular visit?
Yes, so led by Natural Resources Minister Alexander Kozlov last week. Not a ton of details come out of these meetings. I mean, it's coming on the heels of just a lot of, a burgeoning, deepening relationship between Russia and North Korea. This particular meeting, the North Korean state media basically said they were discussing technology, science, economic cooperation. They sort of praised Kozlov and Russia for they quoted Kozlov as praising Russia for sort of supporting praising North Korea for supporting Russia in all of its, regional and international goals. TASS, the Russian news agency, did report that Kozlov said that Russia may start sending supplies of meat to North Korea early next year, and also said that at the meeting they discussed cooperating on exploration for rare earth minerals, offshore oil drilling, and hydrocarbons. So, in some ways, that's some of the first sort of specific things we've seen from, the deliverables from this Russia and North Korea partnership. But obviously, it's coming in the context of, growing military cooperation between North Korea and Russia. And, Washington and Seoul have said many times that North Korea is already supplying arms and artillery to Russia for its war in the Ukraine. And, there's been some questions about what exactly is North Korea getting in return from Russia. And there's been, a lot of talk about technical support for military ambitions, including launching of a spy satellite that they've announced they've planned to do. They haven't done it yet. There's also some growing concern that Russia may be helping out with their nuclear ambitions. Secretary of State Antony Blinken mentioned that possibility when he was here last week. So I think those are, some of the things that people are keeping an eye on. And this, this just comes in the wake of several of these diplomatic engagements between Russia and North Korea.
Right, indeed. And Malene, this particular trip by the Russian delegation also comes amid news of fresh advances in North Korea's banned ballistic missile program. Could you tell us a bit more about these particular advances and perhaps also their broader concerning implications?
Yes. So according to the U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, he's concerned that China and Russia are both helping North Korea developing and strengthen its military. And the thing is, right now, the U.S. have sanctions against North Korea, both regarding the missile program and the nuclear program. So if it's true that China and Russia are helping North Korea, they are actually helping North Korea violating sanctions against the country. This spy satellite that Thomas was also mentioning, it is, Seoul is, the Seoul National Intelligence Agency, they have been claiming that Russia might help North Korea in making this spy satellite, which then would be a breach with the U.S. Sanctions against the country. However, right now, we're not sure. We know that North Korea is at the final stage of launching a new missile, but we don't know how far they are, and it has not been confirmed whether Russia has actually helped North Korea.
Right, and staying with this, Thomas, as you mentioned as well, this growing collaboration between North Korea and Russia, some pundits claim may be a source of some concern for neighboring China as well. What Thomas, do they mean, and what are your thoughts on this?
Right. Well, there was an article recently or last week in the Diplomat that sort of talked about this, which was kind of breaking down. There's some pros and some cons, I think, for China. And I mean, on the pro side, China's interests are sort of aligned in the sense of, wanting Russia, if North Korea is helping Russia in its war against the Ukraine, China would rather see Russia, I think, prevail than, and Russia is on sort of China's side in terms of its positioning against maybe the Western hegemonic sort of, bloc in the world. And, Russia also, China also, I think, has an interest in North Korea staying afloat, not collapsing, and maybe even advancing its weapons in the sense of acting as a buffer between, South Korea and, the U.S. forces here. But at the same time, China has, a lot more positions on the board globally than, North Korea and Russia are kind of it's like a partnership of mutual need and interest at this point, whereas China has been cautious in outright supporting Russia. I mean, they've been very, they haven't supplied them directly with weapons or really, and, even in discussing the Russia-North Korea partnership, they haven't kind of outright blessed it. I mean, they've just kind of said it's between the two countries. And, for China, they have to navigate just the whole their economic position in the world. Russia and North Korea are kind of in the pariah position now, whereas China really has to navigate sort of dealing with the rest of the world and, being so economically intertwined, as well as, I don't think China wants to be seen as, the head of this new trilateral military alignment in this region, because then, suddenly you have NATO and perhaps they're called the AP4 here, which is the Western aligned, South Korea, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand, having a greater reason to kind of strengthen their cooperation with NATO, which China doesn't really want to see happen. And, if you have North Korean weapons being used in the Ukraine and perhaps even in Gaza, you're in NATO-related territories now, which gives them a reason to come back. And so I think, China has a lot to sort of lose as well by being too strongly aligned in this. And even President Yoon just mentioned it in a newspaper interview with The Telegraph before his trip to UK, saying that he thinks China has divergent interests with Russia and North Korea, and this would harm its international reputation and standing.
Right. Melanie, this next question is something that I discussed with our foreign correspondents last Thursday, I believe. I'm going to extend the same question to you. There is concern within the government here, as well as over in the US, about the possibility of a miscalculated move by North Korea against South Korea, given the turmoil across the world at the moment. Speaking within your capacity as a correspondent based here, what do you believe are the prospects of a Hamas-style attack by North Korea against South Korea?
Well, I think that there is no doubt that countries are inspiring each other. So, of course, North Korea has been aware of this attack by Hamas on Israel. And of course, I think North Korea is also checking out the international statements against Hamas and against Israel as well, because it seems like a big part of, maybe not the governments, but the populations have actually been supporting Palestine in this conflict. And I think that there is no doubt that North Korea has been seeing this. However, I don't really think that these two situations necessarily compare. I don't think that, South Korea and North Korea does not have the same relationship as Israel-Palestine. And also North Korea is not a terrorist group. So I really doubt that North Korea could dream of making this kind of attack, to be honest. And also, North Korea is a member of the UN, just as South Korea. And we all know that if North Korea decided to attack South Korea as another UN member, that would have huge global consequences for North Korea, much huger than they probably have been for Hamas, because Hamas is not a country, it is a terrorist organization. So in a way, they don't need to play by the global rules in the same way that we see North Korea would have to, which has also been pointed out by the US in a statement recently.
And staying with the same question, Thomas, what is your line of thought? Do you believe that the possibilities of such an attack is there? And if so, what response measures do you envision from the international community, including South Korea, of course?
Well, I definitely agree with Milena that it doesn't seem a likely prospect. I mean, even from the perspective of what North Korea could possibly seem to gain out of it at this point. I mean, I think the response would undoubtedly be severe. I mean, it would depend, I think, on the nature of the attack. But, South Korea, the U.S., the United Nations Command, which is based here, and its function is to maintain the armistice agreement. And just even last week, there was a meeting with Defense Secretary, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin was here, and South Korean defense officials and the representatives of the UNC countries, and they made a statement basically reiterating that they would defend the armistice. I mean, Washington and Seoul have said many times that any nuclear move by North Korea would spell the end of its regime. So I don't know if, where the line is for that if they were to try to do that. But, I think generally speaking, for all the reasons Milena said, I mean, it's not a real equivalency to compare maybe what North Korea's rationale for an attack like that would be as, compared with Hamas. I think the greater concern that observers have is that North Korea clearly is intent on building up its nuclear arsenal more than anything. And, some of the reasoning behind that could be that, if North Korea can get its nuclear capability to such a state that, it becomes a much bigger disincentive for countries to take action against North Korea if it does kind of, provoke any military confrontation. I mean, that could be a context where if the North does actually have plans or a goal sometime to attack the South or try to overthrow the government or attack Seoul, I mean, if it's something where there could be those types of skirmishes and, countries would be less inclined to take a strong reaction because of the nuclear threat that North Korea poses. I mean, that's something maybe looking longer term. But yeah, otherwise, I mean, not to say you shouldn't prepare for the possibility of those of a cross-border attack like that militarily, but it doesn't seem to be really, in the offing at this moment.
And hopefully you're right then. Beyond the Korean Peninsula, Milane, let's turn over to the US, where diplomatic engagements on the multilateral level and bilateral level took place in San Francisco. What do you believe, Milane, are some of the viable economic initiatives proposed by President Yoon Suk-yeol at this year's APEC Summit?
Well, President Yoon Suk-yeol made it very clear that he wants to strengthen the economical ties in the region. So he hopes for a closer cooperation with the partners in APEC as well going forward. And I think that is a very wise move made by Yoon Suk-yeol, and it's also clearly very much part of his policy. He's trying to get closer to at least especially Japan, and trying to mend some of the diplomatic problems that there has been, especially during the Moon Jae-in government, where Japan and South Korea was, well, almost literally in a trade war at some point. So I think what Yoon is trying to do is to strengthen especially the ties with Japan, which we also saw at APEC. He was having a summit with Kishida. It was also discussed whether he might have a summit with Xi Jinping. However, that didn't turn out to be. This might, though, also have been good for Yoon Suk-yeol, since, as far as I believe, South Korea is on its way for its first annual trade deficit with China, and it would be the first ever since they started having this trade collaboration, which obviously is not so good for the South Korean economy.
Right. And among the brief or even the longer bilateral interactions that President Yoon was able to have with his global partners, what would you care to highlight, Thomas?
Well, I mean, probably the headline, of course, is another meeting with Kishida. I mean, just kind of demonstrating the growing relationship between Tokyo and Seoul. I think it was their 7th summit this year, which is really in stark contrast to the past. And, there's just a lot of overlapping economic and security issues. And there was also a short trilateral with Biden, Kishida, and Yoon, which is also, that whole relationship is growing quite a lot. I mean, certainly the security-related issues and, other issues. Yoon and Kishida talked about cooperation in the hydrogen sector, and they had a separate meeting after the APEC sideline at a discussion at Stanford. And there's just digital technology stuff, AI, carbon reduction. I mean, they have those kinds of overlapping interests as well. Yoon also did meet with a few other leaders from Vietnam, Peru, Chile. And, you know, those are sort of interesting. Like the Peru, he met with Dina Boluarte, the Peruvian president, and that discussion was about both defense cooperation or defense sales. I mean, South Korea has become a big military supplier, and they want to sell more equipment to Peru, but also about cooperation in the mineral sector. And both Peru and Chile are, huge producers of copper, and Peru is Chile of lithium as well. And those are, major resources for the future of clean and renewable energy. I mean, lithium is used in batteries, copper is used in wiring and all sorts of, components for wind and solar arrays. So, these are important relationships going forward globally. And I mean, Yoon at APEC also kind of made a point of discussing supply chain issues and sort of renewable energy future. So this plays a bit into that. And, it's also, I think we're seeing how South Korea continues to kind of emerge more on a global stage. I mean, obviously it's the alliance with Washington is important, but South Korea also has its own sort of role that it's stepping into, and this is an area that I think we're seeing more of that.
Right, and beyond the various diplomatic initiatives in San Francisco, APAC this year saw its fair share of protesters. Melanie, do tell us a bit about their grievances.
Yeah, so there was a lot of different protesters. Some of them were protesting against the Israel-Hamas war. However, I think the more relevant protests for the APEC Summit was global warming, poor working conditions, and corporate profits. Because many of the protesters were arguing that many of the countries that were meeting at APEC in San Francisco were some of the leaders in charge of stopping global warming, but the thought was that they were not really doing enough. So there was a lot of protesters complaining that these world leaders, they should take a bigger stance on climate, and now that they're all meeting together, they actually have the perfect chance to work together to prevent global warming and also to help to get better working conditions. A lot of the countries meeting at the summit were from countries and leaders where the working conditions are not so good and where there is a very huge gap between rich and poor, a lot of inequality. So I think many of the protesters were feeling that there is not done enough to try to stop these social problems and try to prevent social injustice as well as climate injustice.
Right, indeed. They were calling for more action then. Overall, Thomas, how do you assess this year's APAC Summit amid, of course, the conflicts in different parts of the world?
Right. So, they didn't come out with any joint declaration about the Gaza issue or the war in the Ukraine, which I don't think, anyone really expected you could get something like that out of such a diverse group. I mean, I think the big takeaway for most observers was the Biden-Xi summit, which, again, it's not going to repair the sort of Washington-Beijing relationship, but I think just the fact that communication has started again is a relief to a lot of observers. I mean, they, not a lot specific came out of it, but they agreed to reestablish military-to-military communication, which a lot of people were concerned about. They just sort of talked about if I pick up the phone, the other one will answer, and that's, that in itself is important, I think, in this environment where, miscommunication or mishaps could lead to much worse. I mean, there were some domestic things that Biden took away as far as getting China to try to rein in, the production of compounds used to make fentanyl, which is an issue in the U.S. I mean, Biden also mentioned he, raised the issue with Xi about trying to get Iran to perhaps, which Beijing has more influence over, to not, to sort of step back and not escalate the situation in Gaza. But I think also we're seeing, and this goes a little bit back to what China China's concerns about Russia and North Korea are, China also, I think, was signaling a little bit of a softening or a more kind of open for business approach, and he met with a bunch of CEOs when he was there, like Boeing and Apple. So I think China also, we're seeing they have China's also going through an economic downturn of its own, so they have an interest in kind of being, into the global economic order as well. So, I think that's probably, and that bleeds over into security issues as well, I think. So I think that's probably the takeaway.
Right, hopefully their economic interests bridging their gap over security concerns then. Melanie, how would you evaluate this year's APAC Summit?
Well, I have to agree with Thomas. I think what we really take away from this summit is the Xi-Biden statements and conversations, which I think is a big relief for most people in the world. So yeah, I think also in Denmark that was what was drawing headlines. It was that the Chinese president will come all the way to San Francisco to shake hands with Biden and to talk, and also that it seems like the relationship between US and China is slowly growing stronger, which I think is a very, very positive thing for, most of the citizens all over the world.
Right, well, both of them have acknowledged that that decoupling is a danger and that they need to be together to ensure that there are no callous consequences on the international arena. All right, well, on that note, Melanie, as always, thank you very much for your thoughts and your time. And Thomas, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Right, well, that ends Monday's edition of Issues and Insiders. Thank you for watching. See you same time tomorrow. That is Tuesday.